saw a question on Quora the other day asking how to make an image look more punk in Photoshop. So I will run through a quick tutorial of one of the styles I might use. I'm using an image of Haley Williams that I picked up from 4chan, but obviously this will work with whatever image. Now I'm going to try to work as non-destructive as possible by using adjustment layers. And to start off, I want to use a black and white adjustment layer to make it black and white. And my next adjustment layer is going to be a levels. And what I'm trying to do is to really crash these together in the center to get kind of a threshold looking image. Something along those lines. And my next step is to introduce a duotone, black and one color. And to do that with adjustment layers, you just use a gradient map adjustment layer. And what a gradient map is it's mapping a gradient of your choosing onto the tonal values of your image. So in this instance, I have my black and white image and my red and green gradient map. So it's mapping the red onto the black and the green onto the white. Obviously this isn't what I want, so I want to change this to black. But I don't want a pure black because, excuse me, the old punk flyers were kind of worn out because they were all made on copy machines, and after a certain amount of time that black kind of wore out, so I want to brighten this up a bit. Found 12 is kind of nice for a nice washed out black. And I want to pick some bright color for my other color. I will go with a pink, purple, whatever that is. And just name this gradient map pink. I want to make another duotone with another color. Now, essentially I want to make a copy of this black and white image. Now to do that, I can hit Command Option E to merge those selected layers into a single copied layer of those merged. It's a great way to make a copy without, collapsing stuff. Non-destructive, just creates a copy of those selected merged layers. Now, I also want to make a duplicate of my gradient map, so I can create another one. So I could hit Command J to copy, or I could just hold down Option and drag this up here, and it makes a copy. For this one, I'm going to pick a green, something like that, nice and bright. But I want to make this gradient map green. I want to make this a clipping mask so that it only affects this layer, nothing else. To do that, you just hold down Option, and the line in between these two layers, you'll see your cursor change. You just click, and you got yourself a clipping mask. So now I want to, let me just name this image 2. I want to change the blending mode to screen. And what you end up with is this really cool looking image, which honestly would work for a punk image. If you just laid a texture in here, this would be fine. It's kind of like some old Iggy Pop things I've seen. But I'm going to take it a step further, and what I'm going to do is offset the colors a bit by just using the arrow keys on my keyboard to nudge my image until I start pulling those colors into my image. You see around her arms there, that pink and that green is coming in. You can go as crazy as you want. Something like that, whatever you want to do. That's pretty cool. But I just want to offset it a little bit and try to get it where it's still fairly readable. Now, since this isn't an old copy, I'm going to need a texture. And I found a texture just by going to Google and typing in bad copy texture. Genius. And I made sure with the search tools that I changed the size to larger than that right there, because you want it to search for the largest image possible. And that was the texture I ended up with. So in Photoshop, Let me drag this texture in, pop it in, and it's making itself a clipping mask. Of course it is. Now, to get rid of that, if you don't want this to be a clipping mask, which I don't, you do the same way you would make a clipping mask. You just hold down Option, click between those two layers. No longer a clipping mask. Now I want to rotate this, so I'm going to hit Command T to free transform, get this little box, and then holding down Shift, I just rotate this so that it constrains to 15, 45, 90 degrees. Put this in place, something right there, and then hit Enter. And what I'm looking to do with this texture is to get the white elements onto my photo. But since this is such a gray washed out image, it's going to be kind of difficult, because if I just hit screen, this is what it looks like. It's all mushy, messy. But there's a way to just get those light elements out of there. Just double click my texture layer and go to my blending options, blend if. Now here's the way I think about this. You have two separate sliders, one for this layer, one for underlying layer. For this layer, when you move this black, you're essentially clipping the blacks out of your image, that black tone. And same with the white, you're clipping that white tonal value out of your image. Now underlying layer is taking the values from the underlying layer and using those values to clip out of your current image. See, the whites are clipping out of it, and the black is obviously everywhere, so it's just a huge chunk out of it. But for this instance, I want to use this layer. So I start sliding this to get rid of some of the darker elements, and you can see how nasty it is, how chunky it is. And to fix that, you just hold Option and split this slider in two. And this way you can kind of smooth that out so that it's not as chunky. And this is great for a lot of instances with textures. Sometimes when you put it to screen or multiply or overlay, whatever you're doing, sometimes you're not really getting what you want, and this is where you want to go. Separate the darks, the lights, whatever it is. Makes working with textures a whole lot easier. Let me get this somewhere I like it. Right about there. And at this point, the blacks are a little too light, so I'm going to use another levels layer and bring some of that black back up. Something around there. And maybe punch a little bit of white in there. So there it is. There's my punked image. Now because I offset it, there's this border here, so you're going to have to crop depending on how much you offset. But since this whole thing was done non-destructive, you can go back and mess with your colors to change the colors to something else. But using this method, I want to point something out. You want to kind of work with colors that are on opposite ends of the spectrum, because right now my other color is this pink here, and I'm in green. So if I start moving towards that pink, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get these darker colors, because when they're screened together, that's just the way the colors are blending. So you want to kind of try to work on opposite ends of the spectrum. Green obviously works, and I can even get into yellow here. So just keep that in mind when you're picking your colors. And your levels, if you want to bring some more detail into this, you can just separate these out. And you'll also, because you're getting more tonal value, you also bring more color into this. So it's up to you how far you want to go, how crusty you want it to make it look. You know, if you don't like too much of that texture, you can just, by hitting 1, 2, 3, hitting the numbers on your keyboard, you can change the opacity. There's a million different things you can do to lessen the effect or make it harsher. But there's your punked image.